Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today we are going to be working in Procreate, and I'm just going to quickly go into my OC folder and show you guys these sketches, as this was going to be today's video, but I decided to scrap it as I want to do a different exercise for expressions for my OCs, because I was going to draw all of them and showing different ways how they get embarrassed or flustered and kind of like the different reactions, but we'll save that for a different video because I think I want to format it a little bit differently, and just so we can fit in more like doodle like drawings rather than like a finished product. But for today, as the title suggests, I am going to be attempting to draw my OCs in a semi-realism, I keep saying that wrong, semi-realistic style, I guess it's like semi-realism. So I haven't done realism in like such a long time, and I usually occasionally done semi-realism whenever I draw like K-pop idols very like quickly and I kind of stylize their faces a little bit, but sometimes I keep certain features in which kind of leans toward a more semi-realistic style. So that is what we are going to be tackling today. I am going to be starting off with Maseki, as he's kind of like my basis for whenever I attempt to do any kind of, I don't know, like challenge video or anything like pertaining to my OCs. He's just a good baseline for me because he's the most comfortable for me to draw. I am going to be drawing 2 of my OCs, 2 out of the 4 I guess that I usually draw, and yeah, if you guys are interested in seeing more, or at least like me drawing the other 2, then I'll consider that for a future video. But for now, we're just gonna draw 2. So I'm just gonna start out how I usually start out, which is drawing a circle, putting a few guidelines, and then placing down the eyes first. I decided to pull up a reference of Maseki though, just because I was unsure whether or not I wanted to how to explain this. Actually, I should have put this at the beginning of the video. The semi-realistic style that I did for both Maseki and the next character, it really leans into like the uncanny valley, or at least to me it did. So apologies if they look very uncanny. I should also say that I didn't use reference for these, so this is just based off of my generic knowledge of how to draw just like a basic face. So I drew a very generic nose, and for the 2 characters I did try to differ their lip shape just a little bit. Maseki, for the most part, when I usually draw him, he has more of like a pointier center point of his lip. It's like a little bit more prominent, also like making his face sometimes in a V shape whenever I like simplify or kind of like dumb down his design, if that makes sense. I tend to draw him with like a heart-shaped mouth as well, sometimes when he smiles. So I'm trying my best to keep some of the features in mind. Maybe I'll just go ahead and say it. So I'm going to be drawing Maseki and Sato. So Sato is the other OC that I'm going to be drawing today, just because I would like to talk a little bit about the differences and the features that I wanted to have. But because, like I said, I'm not going to be using reference, it's very minimal differences, I feel like. But I don't think it's like too bad considering they are related to each other. They are cousins. But I think if I do Koji and Akemi in the future, I am gonna use references. Probably more of like for 2 reasons. I do want Akemi to look a little bit more different compared to Maseki, because I feel like they have too many similarities anyways. And then for Koji, he has a little bit more of like sharper features, but he's also like a child, so he has more of a like a baby face rather than like how I would draw Maseki. So yeah, I feel like I would definitely need references for those 2, and considering how today's session went, reference was probably needed for both Maseki and Sato. So whenever I imagined my OCs, like what potentially they could look like in real life, Maseki, I feel like, would have probably similar eyes to mine. So I believe I have like almond-shaped eyes, but my eyes also point downwards just a smidge, making me look a little bit sad, unfortunately. But I feel like Maseki would have similar eye shape, except for I didn't make his droop as like downward enough, I guess, if that makes sense. But I also wanted to give him hooded eyelids. So I've always drawn Masaki with hooded eyelids and Sato with hooded eyelids. Masaki more so than like Sato, but then for Akemi and Koji, I want them to have like monolids, just because it pertains closer to like sharper eyes. I think does. I'm pretty sure Akemi has monolids. I don't really remember, but usually I draw Masaki and Sato with the hooded eyelids because I don't know, maybe it's just like my bias because I also have hooded eyelids. It's just easier for me to think about. Though I know a lot of people who draw like anime characters and stuff tend to draw them with like double eyelids for the most part. Some of them with like more like monolids or like implied monolids, but for the most part, like you'll see sometimes a very pronounced crease above the eyes, indicating like a double eyelid. Well, for like Masaki and Sato, there's kind of like a flap of skin or a line that comes off from where the eye is because of where the skin is kind of overlapping the lid a bit. So that is what a hooded eyelid is. But yeah, for the portraits, so I decided to keep the color scheme quite simple, and I decided to draw them both in their normal outfits. I know the reference in the top right or top left hand corner is kind of like Masaki in more of his fall attire, which I tend to draw quite a bit more recently, but I wanted to draw him in his more normal attire just because it will look more like Masaki in general. But I did try my best to kind of mute the colors a little bit so they don't look as jarring, just because like whenever I work in something that's more stylized, if I can, I like to push the colors a little bit more to be like vibrant. So for like the backgrounds, I kind of did like a typical kind of very soft lighting for the kind of like a portraiture, so kind of like neutral background, a little bit cooler for the shadows, a little bit of warmth from where the light source could be, and then I went right ahead and started to color in the face. And I'm basically gonna color in the same steps that I usually do. For some strange odd reason, I didn't, or like I think I forgot to set the sketch layer to be on multiply rather than just on normal. So you'll see once I start to color in Masaki's eyes, I will suddenly realize that the color is not correct and that it's not on the multiply layer, so I'll adjust that a little bit after. But for Masaki's lip shape, like I said, I do like his lips to be a little bit more like pointy near the tip, making his lips just, I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like he would have not like super thin lips, but not either like full lips. I think I had a harder time deciding Sato's lip shape a little bit. I kept hers very generic too. I think definitely when I think a bit more about like Akemi and Koji, if I decide to do a realistic, semi-realistic version for theirs, I will definitely kind of pick out individual features and see if I can kind of Frankenstein them a little bit. Because Masaki was kind of like my first attempt at doing semi-realism in quite a while, and usually when I do semi-realism, it's usually the opposite. So usually I'm not turning like a stylistic character into semi-realism. I'm usually taking like a person who's already pre-existing, like an actual human, usually with like a photo reference, and then simplifying their features into a semi-realistic style. I'll try to pop in some examples. Like I said, I don't have any that are like super recent, and the ones that I'm going to be showing you guys are mostly just the digital ones that I did when I was practicing digital painting a couple of years back. And these ones were actually like some of the drawings that really pushed me into wanting to do digital painting rather than like my weird cell shady gradient type of coloring that I used to do before. But yeah, I feel like there's a few sketches in my old sketchbooks that kind of borderline between kind of like stylistic and semi-realism, getting closer to semi-realism. I remember I talked about in a old sketchbook tour, I think, where I think I labeled something as semi-realism when it wasn't, and people said it was closer to webtoon styled. But I feel like a lot of webtoon styles also have almost like stylistic to semi-realism in a sense. I'm always like in awe of people who do webtoons, especially like I think like Korean manhwa. I think it's manhwa, right? Where the characters are drawn with such detail and it's like full color. It always baffles me on like how efficiently these people must be drawing and coloring, unless they do have an assistant, but like either way it's still a lot of work. But I always love seeing it because like their art is so dang pretty. So I think like there's some good reference to go off from there. But I think, yeah, like I said, in the future, if I plan to do this again, I will definitely use reference and see if I can match features to them a little bit closely. Masaki, yeah, I went on a tangent. Masaki was my first attempt at doing this in general, so I didn't really have like a plan going in to this, to be honest, and I will take a break from him a little bit at a point where I thought he was going to be finished, and then I will start to draw Sato. I'll see a lot of the errors that I did in Sato and then suddenly start to liquefy and correct. And once I get Sato into a place where I think looked, you know, kind of okay, I actually went back to fix Masaki. So the eyes, let's talk about the eyes a little bit, because I feel like eyes are like one of those things, I think a lot of like artists can relate. Eyes are like one of those things that you doodle on your paper frequently and stuff, like during schools or on notes and stuff, back when we were younger. But I feel like once we learn how to draw in like an eye shape, we're kind of like, you kind of remember it. And I used to draw a lot of realism, and one of my favorite parts is to draw the eyes. If anything, I draw very similarly in a very inefficient way with realism, in the same way that I draw like my stylized art. So I would start with the eyes first, but I would like fully render an eye, move on to the next eye, move on to the nose, then the mouth, then I would like put into the face and then the hair, which is very inefficient because you should really block out everything. But because of that, I was trying to draw like my favorite parts of the face, which tends to be the eyes first, which I didn't really stylize Masaki's eyes that much. It still looks very much in the anime-ish realm, just with a little bit more detail and not as large probably as compared to how I would usually draw like anime eyes. But a little bit later I am going to fix it up a little bit so that they kind of border in towards semi-realism a little bit more. So I'll get like the tear duct in, part of the lower lash line being exposed, where also that having that little lip of skin before it hits the sclera. I don't know how to explain these, to be honest. I never really learned like formally how to do realism and stuff. Like I said, when I did stuff for uni and I was in drawing classes, painting classes and stuff, a lot of them are very much not too structured, and we do things for only 2 weeks at a time. So we work on a project for 2 weeks and a topic for 2 weeks. We have a critique, and then you move on to the next project usually. For drawing, we did a lot of like life studies and a lot of still lives for drawing, but we never really got to do like portraits of the face. And I remember before we would pair up in groups of 3, I think, or maybe it was just pairs, and then after that you would just move on to the next person. Like I think you label one person 1 and another, your partner, number 2, and the professor would be like, everyone who's number 2 like shifts to the right so that you're with a new person. But we would do like 15-minute portraitures of our partner. So obviously I had my friend pose for me, and I would do the 15-minute portraiture. And I found it funny because like she really liked it, but I tend to make features very much I don't know how to explain it, a little bit more delicate and weirdly, they described it as like elf-like, fairy-like. So I don't know if I was accidentally like babying their faces and making their eyes a little bit bigger, adding too many like embellishments that make them a little bit not exactly like realistic, if that makes sense. And I think it has to do with me being tied too closely with like stylized art. So even like I remember like the first 2 years of just doing drawing studies and just like painting and stuff in general, anything that had to do with the human figure, I had an issue like stylizing, except for like body proportions because we were doing it from life. But I feel like for me, because I didn't keep up with that practice, it didn't really transfer till now, because the way how I think about the body is a little bit different compared to how we did life studies, where you have like the actual model in front of you. And not only that, like, I don't know, I have fond memories of taking, like, being a fine arts student, but there's some, like, it's still a little bit jarring for me. I remember the first time we had our first like model session for drawing the body, human anatomy, but we weren't told that it's gonna be like a nude model. So I just remember all of us being around. We set up our easels. The model comes in, takes off their robe, and then like I just look at my friend and we're like both panicked. I was glad that I got like more of a side view. I did not like. I think a lot of us just didn't want the front view. There's some people like who are like super chill about it, but a lot of us were like fresh 18-year-olds and we're like very confused why our prof didn't tell us. But like our prof was like super chill too, so like I feel like he wouldn't care to tell us, but whatever. It was just things. I was always happy that when I got the side of a person or the back of the person. I love drawing backs. Backs is very fun if you draw it with charcoal and they have either like musculature or if they contort their body in a certain way. It's really cool to see like the shoulders and the back muscles and stuff. I don't know. But moving on. So I finished up Masaki for the most part. Basically I just moved on because I was very lost and I decided to move on to Sato. So Sato's gonna go under a lot of liquefying and fixing because I still drew her very stylized. Even right now, like I'm looking at the eyes and I'm like, why? Yeah, I'm gonna be fixing the eyes up so that they become a lot more into semi-realism-ish area where the eyes just look a little bit more exaggerated but a little bit stylized, if that makes sense. But for now, I'm kind of struggling placing her features. Yeah, I don't know what else I can say once we start to actually fiddle with the features. Also with the mouth, I was very confused on how to give her like a specific expression. So Sato is a little bit more headstrong. She's very much like a leader type of person, a little bit more fiery personality. Like she would clearly probably butt heads with Koji. They probably have similar personalities. Koji's a little bit more like outbursts, a little bit more tsundere. A little bit. I think Sato wouldn't be, but she's definitely more in your face, kind of doesn't care, but still like very sweet, especially to the people she cares about, like Masaki, who she probably wants to protect as like a cousin. But I didn't know what expression to give her because, like I said, not using a reference gives me a little bit of options or less options, if that makes sense. So yeah, I was struggling. But also for Masaki's hair, I didn't talk about this. I tried to add more details and make his hair a little bit less stylized to how I did it usually when I draw him in my like more anime style. Like you can see right here, like I tend to chunk in their hair in certain ways and draw their hair in certain patterns just because it's easy for me to doodle and it's very recognizable to the character. But I was like, when I was drawing Sato and I was coloring her hair, I was realizing how difficult it would be to have her hairstyle. So I know like anime hair and like cartoon hair, like a lot of it wouldn't make sense anyways, but Sato has a large chunk of like bang part, a big chunk of hair just like swooping right across her face, and then she has bangs, but her hair is like parted. I don't know, I feel like I can justify her hair if I need to, so I should probably maybe do a reference of it eventually, but I feel like she would just have like some kind of side-swept-ish looking bangs, and then she just pulls like a chunk of her hair from like the right side over to the left and just have it swing across. I feel like that's how her hair would be. She probably would have like a part different from her hair. I don't know how to explain it. For the shading, so I basically followed the same process as I did for Masaki. I made her background a little bit more of a light pale grayish blue, so that it fits with her color scheme a little bit more. I did stick with more neutral colors for Masaki, but similar to Masaki's, I wanted Sato's colors for like the background stuff just not to be too jarring and vibrant. So I started off with like trying to figure out her lip shape a little bit. I think I started off with her lip being a lot thinner on the top and then a little bit more fuller on the bottom, and then I'm adding the shading and the highlights to the lips because a lot of people just like making glossy lips and I'm no exception. So yeah, I wanted to do that for Sato, but I think a little bit later, just to make sure that what is this part of your face called? Philtrum and the Cupid's bow. I'm not sure if that's what it's called. I know this is like the Cupid's bow, but to make sure that it wasn't too long, I did try extending her lip shape a little bit higher a little bit later so that it kind of decreases the amount of space between the bottom of her nose to her lip shape. But then I actually started fiddling a lot with her nose. So I had a hard time thinking what would push the style a lot more to also semi-realism, other than like eye shape, potentially how you shade everything too. But I feel like a nose is also a big factor into that. So I was kind of confused how much of the nose did I want to render to actually resemble like an actual nose. Like, did I want to do the 2 nostril flap things? I don't know what they're called. I did not take anatomy. But yeah, I didn't know how much I wanted to render. So I kept it a little bit more simple. I believe I add a little bit more for Sato, and then I will go back into Masaki's and kind of flesh it out just a little bit more. Because I feel like his is a little bit too vague still, so I will try to fix that a little bit more, as well with the eyes. So at this point, I don't fix Sato's eyes until we get to the rendering stage, and right now I'm still adding in like general coloring, just trying to establish the lighting and stuff, and trying to figure out the value and the structure of everything so we have a good base before I merge and start to render. For the hair, like I said, I had a bit of a hard time trying to figure out how to make her hair make sense. But for Masaki and Sato, I did decide to color it a little bit differently. So usually when I do it in a more stylized way, I do like to chunk things a little bit more, make highlights like super exaggerated, sometimes add different colors, but I rely a lot on the shape. But for these ones, I did do a little bit more of like streakier lines, so we kind of indication of more of like hair strands, so it's closer to more of a higher amount of detail, similar to like realism. But I didn't want to go too far because that would require me to do a little bit more planning of stuff. So at this point, I have everything merged after adjusting the line colors and everything. So I am going to take my time to actually try to fix the eye shapes to become a little bit more into that semi-realistic area, but because of that, it also goes into the uncanny valley a little bit more. So apologies that Sato probably looks very strange, and same with Masaki a little bit later. I also am gonna say that I will fix the placement of Sato's right eye. Technically it's the left eye, but it's the right eye on the canvas, like the right side of the canvas. I will try to fix, because I didn't realize that I did something that I tend to usually do, if that I tilt the character's face and then suddenly want them to be facing forward. I feel like I shift everything except for the one eye, so it is off, and I'll have that kind of fixed towards the end, because I know it makes it a little bit harder to look at too, because the eyes are a little bit misplaced. But like I said, for the hair, I'm gonna try to add a little bit more detail, but both for Masaki and Sato's pieces, I did not fully flesh out to be super finished, as in like completely clean, no sketchy lines and all that. I kind of left it at a place where I felt just comfortable, that I think I got my point across, hopefully. So yeah, so I'm gonna try my best to keep kind of more like strands and indication of just the hair strands everywhere. And this is when I started to liquefy her face, because the problem I had was that I made her face a little bit too tiny and pointy, similar to like anime styled versus like a semi-realistic style, which I feel like the face would be a little bit less like cartoony by having like super like shaved down jawline where it looks like a pointy egg, if that makes sense. So I decided to puff out her jawline a little bit, made her chin a little bit thicker, and I'm gonna do the same thing for Masaki as well, because he kind of needs it, because his chin is very small, and I feel like he wouldn't have that small of a chin in real life. Or I don't even know if can you have that small of a chin. I don't know, maybe I just haven't I haven't looked at like a human figure, I feel like, to make a good comparison. But for the most part, I think this was just a fun experiment. I don't really remember what brought upon this, but yeah, I don't know. I think a part of it was just because like I was just probably thinking of what Masaki would look like if he was... Oh, no, I think I remember. I think I was just scrolling through pictures on my my phone to see what I could delete, because sometimes I have excess amount of screenshots and everything. And I found a picture of June from 17, and he's wearing like the teal-ish color, and his hair is parted in a certain way that's similar to Masaki, and he has a little bit more of like chestnut brown hair, which is very similar to Masaki. So I was like thinking, would June be like the closest actual person that like I could think of from the top of my head that looks like Masaki? Maybe I feel like Masaki would have softer looking eyes, if anything, and probably not that sharp of a jawline like June does, or small of a face like June does. I feel like June has a little bit sharper eyes. He has like an intense look, I feel like, but like his mouth shape's very similar. Styling wise, I think is very similar to Masaki, but yeah. Ooh, I don't know. Yeah. I feel like I'm getting into the uncanny valley feeling. Uncanny valley is just, yeah, I don't know. Sato just looks a little off. I think it is because of that eye placement too, though. But I did try my best to make Masaki match a little bit. Like I said, I was trying to make his eyes just face downwards a little bit if I could. And then I did a test of adding a little bit of the tear duct. I'm gonna add a little bit more of highlights and stuff, and I'm gonna kind of flesh out his nose, because like I said, I didn't know how I wanted to do his nose, and I'm thinking he would have like a little bit more of a prominent nose. I don't know if he would have like a high bridge. I was gonna make Sato have a lower bridge, kind of more button shaped, Masaki to have more of a prominent sharp nose. I feel like maybe Akemi would have like a really either like petite or like more prominent. We'll see how I do his face. And then Koji, I would have to do a little bit more thinking, especially with his freckles and stuff. I would like to do that a little bit more accurately, since I feel like I do it a little haphazardly sometimes. But I think you guys can tell, if I can, I like rendering the nose. I really do. Like, even though this is without reference and purely from my brain and seeing what I can remember, I still enjoy rendering the nose. Just adding those highlights and those shadows and reflected lights is very fun. But yeah, here's Sato, which I will fix the eye a little bit later. And there's Masaki. But if you guys do want to see potentially some kind of like expression study or something for my OCs, do let me know and we can do that sometime in the future. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!